My name is Randy Burke, and this is the story of my life until today. I come from a pretty big family. I have two sisters and two brothers, and they are all much older than me. I was born 12 years after my younger sister. We were a poor family. My father worked in a factory, but he spent everything he earned on horse racing or in the bar. Mom worked as a saleswoman at a nearby grocery store. We lived in what we called projects. These were residential areas with government support. Mom and Dad were often separated, and that is why we lived in such conditions. Father sometimes appeared unexpectedly. My childhood was not happy. All my brothers and sisters moved out as soon as they turned 18 or 19. They wanted to escape the terrible life we had at home. My father often got drunk. We didn't understand why Mom put up with it for so long. This time she filed a complaint against him, and the father went to prison for a couple of months. After he got out, my mom got a restraining order against him and finally filed for divorce. We still lived in the same squalid apartment, but at least we no longer had to endure him. My mother received alimony and benefits from me. Thanks to this money and working in the store, we were able to make ends meet. Sometimes I saw my brothers and sisters, but we were not close. The age difference was too great. I didn't have many friends because I was a poor guy from the projects. I understood that my mother did her best, but this did not stop the other children from making fun of me. Over time, I developed a reputation as a bad guy. Mom had to come to school at least 4 times before I graduated. I wasn't particularly smart, and I think the teachers just transferred me to get me out of school faster. I talked to several guys with the same reputation as mine. I didn't let anyone wipe their feet on me. In school, I mowed lawns and took on odd jobs to earn some money. I gave half of what I earned to my mother and kept the rest for myself. I wanted to save up for a motorcycle. I didn't have the brains or the money to go to college. I was good at working with my hands, and after graduation I got a job in construction. I helped renovate houses, worked with concrete. The work was hard, but it kept me in shape and paid well. One of my brothers was looking to sell his old Harley. I made an agreement with him, gave him the money I had saved up, and continued to pay him monthly until I paid in full. Now I feel like a tough guy. In the evenings I worked on motorcycles and hung out at a biker bar. Some of my colleagues from the construction site also went there. This is how the next 5 years of my life passed. I want to tell you a little about the biker bar. This was not a biker gang like in the 50s and 60s. We were not a criminal gang that terrorized the surrounding areas. But yes, we drank a lot and partied. The only fights we ever got into were started by someone else, or when one of us got too drunk. It was almost always because of a woman. Most of these guys were construction workers or worked in car factories. I must say that this was a rather rude company, but among them I felt at home. As for the women, they themselves came to the bar. Most of them knew who we were, and on the weekends, after the bar closed, the owner, Butch, would close the doors and the real party would begin. Anyone could leave at any moment, but there was no way to return. We paid for our own drinks, but our club covered any outstanding bills. We didn't want to piss off Butch. We had about 70 club members, but rarely more than 20 people were in the bar at one time. Non-bikers would sometimes come into the bar, but as a rule, after they saw us, they left pretty quickly. It was only on Fridays, as I will explain later, that the atmosphere changed. As for the women who came to the bar, most of them were girls who loved to party. There was a college nearby, and even married women would sometimes drop by, and we knew what they wanted. I think there were quite a few regular visitors. A couple of rooms behind the bar were used for sex during business hours, but after closing, most of it happened in plain sight. No woman has ever been raped. There were always plenty of women available on the weekends, so we didn't have to force anyone. True, after a woman came to the club for a couple of weeks, we considered her something like property of the club. This meant that she could count on sex with almost any member of the club. Nobody forced the woman anyway, but she was warned what was expected of her. The main exception was if a biker called her his girlfriend, then she usually did not have intimate relationships with the others. Some bikers had wives who sometimes came to the parties. These were women who didn't care what their husbands did. I had sex with some of them, and they told me, just let him bring home a salary and provide for the children, let him have fun on the side as much as he wants. It happened that after several relationships with different guys, a woman asked one of the bikers to become her boyfriend, so she ceased to be accessible to everyone. Some of the guys looked pretty tough, and sometimes a biker would let her sleep with someone else, but only with his permission. Carlos was one of the oldest members of the club who was always present. He was their back when my brothers were in the club. You could say that he was the president of the club, since he had been attending it for 15 years. There were a couple of other old members who hung out at the bar regularly. Most members stayed with the club for 4 or 5 years and then moved on with their lives. Sometimes former members would drop by just to say hello. I had been a member of the club for 5 years, and it was all starting to feel monotonous. I felt like I was ready to move on. Butch's Bar had fish dinners on Fridays, and it was something special. This tradition started before I even knew about the existence of the bar. On this day, old bikers with their families came to the bar to have dinner. They usually left soon after eating. I don't know how Butch did it, but it was the best fish I've ever tasted. He also had shrimp and sandwiches for those who didn't like fish and chips. Butch's fish dinners were famous throughout the area, and this was the only day when many non-bikers and their families came to the bar. I saw my brothers come with their families at least once a month. We rarely saw each other after my mother died, and I just somehow lost touch with them. It was nice to see them when they came for the fish dinner. After my mom died, I moved into a trailer in a mobile home park. I only rented it, but it was enough for me. All I did there was sleep and shower. I rarely ate at home. I had a motorcycle and a pickup truck, both paid for, so I was happy with my life. But I began to think about my life, and although I was not bothered by parties and sex in a bar, I wanted something more. After my mother died, it was sad to come home to an empty house. Carlos knew several girls and invited them to the club. He warned them it was a biker bar and what we do after hours. It's hard to believe how many college girls came to visit us on the weekends. It seemed like they wanted to feel something wild. We had almost no students and certainly no well-groomed guys. These were rough, strong men working in hard physical work. The same girls didn't always come, but the result was the same. They drank and had sex. Sometimes someone would try to bring in illegal substances, but if Butch noticed, he would kick them out of the bar for good. Most bikers adhered to Butch's rules. I met Sheila when she came to a bar with a couple of friends on the weekend. After closing, she immediately joined the party and started drinking. She seemed different to me, and I began to follow her. Carlos slept with her first. I just shook my head. Why would such a girl ruin her life and behave like this? She was completely out of her mind and was passed over. Everyone always liked trying new things. I mentioned that some bikers had a wife or girlfriend who would sometimes come into the bar. Carlos had a girlfriend he dated for 14 years, Sharon. They lived together and had 2 children, but never got married. Sharon and I have talked quite a few times. I asked her how she could live with a guy who slept with different women all the time. She told me that she started out just like young girls, and she liked the excitement, the partying, and the lifestyle you want to do. She fell in love with Carlos and became pregnant. After a few years, she realized that he was not going to change, and she simply agreed with him. She didn't like watching him with other women anymore. She was afraid of losing him. They now had 2 children, and as soon as the children went to school, she got a job at an insurance agency. She wouldn't leave Carlos because she still cared about him. I really felt sorry for her. She visited him on weekends, and it bothered her when she saw him with these students. That's how she met him and knew that one day she might lose him. I wish I knew Sharon before she met Carlos. She was a good person and deserved a better life than what she expected. Someday, perhaps, she will be smart enough to leave Carlos. To be honest, Sharon and I did this a few times when Carlos was drunk. She was one of the few people I had gentle sex with. We knew that nothing would work out for us, so we didn't see each other very often. Carlos had no idea how many times I slept with his wife. Sharon and I remained good friends, receiving benefits from time to time. As I said, I was keeping an eye on Sheila. She was different from many of the girls who came to the club. I used the old saying, "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this?" She came up to me and said, "Do you want me?" Apparently, she was heavily under the influence of alcohol. She was beautiful, slender, with long blonde hair and a beautiful face. "I noticed that you have been watching me all evening. They told me your name was Randy and that you were one of the quiet ones. This is true?" Sheila asked. Earlier, while Sheila was having fun, I was already with one of the married women who often came to the bar. I preferred to spend time with married women because they came for the same thing, sex, and I gave them what they needed. I looked at Sheila. "Honey, you're gorgeous and I wouldn't give up on you, but I don't like being last in line. I prefer to be first, if you know what I mean. Maybe another time." She looked at me in surprise. She didn't seem to get rejected very often. Then I saw her approach the bar owner, Butch. She was probably asking about me. Damn, why is she acting like a walker? I think I could really like a girl like that. Butch later said that she asked about me, where I worked, whether I was married, whether I had a girlfriend. He said she showed interest in me. I told him that I turned her down, and she was probably just not used to it. Butch laughed, and I headed home. I admit I often thought about her, which was strange because we hardly communicated. 2 weeks later, she returned to the bar with a friend named Trisha. She said hello to Butch and then walked over to me. I sat drinking beer. When the music started playing, she asked me to dance. I looked at her for a few seconds before standing up. I silently took her hand and hugged her, pressing her to me. "So what brings you here again? Didn't you have enough time last time?" I asked. I don't know why I spoke to her like that. Every week, students came to us and did the same thing as she did. "I came to see you. Why are you so cruel to me? Did I do something wrong?" she asked with sadness in her voice. "Sorry, but I'm not used to relationships where partners share with each other. You just seem like a special girl. Sorry, everyone has their own life." I didn't even understand what I was saying, so I just fell silent. "Look, Randy, I think we started off on the wrong foot. Yes, I like to have fun, but I don't usually act like I did last time. I think Carlos put something in my drink. Of course, I cannot prove this, but it really seems so to me, and there's no going back, it's just sex." I liked her, and I hugged her tighter to me. We spent the evening together, drank quite a bit, and she told me about herself. Other guys came up and asked her to dance, but she refused, answering, "No, thanks, I'm with Randy today." Some of the bikers looked at us strangely, but they knew not to mess with me, and I didn't even say a word. I just looked at them, and they walked away. Because of my job, I was always in good physical shape, I had muscles, and I didn't have to train extra. I had a reputation as a guy who wasn't afraid to fight since I was a kid, starting in middle school. I was arrested several times, but the charges never stuck. I didn't start fights, but I always finished them. I asked Butch to make us sandwiches while Sheila talked about herself. I was a good listener, and it was definitely worth listening to. Sheila was in her senior year and was due to graduate in a few weeks. She was from a fairly wealthy family. Her father worked as an engineer at an automobile plant, and her mother did medical billing at home. Sheila was studying to be a nurse and had already been promised a place at the local hospital. She had a sister named Olivia, 2 years younger, who was also studying to be a nurse in college. When I asked why her sister didn't come to Butch's bar, Sheila explained that she and Olivia were complete opposites. Sheila loved to have fun, but Olivia, according to her, was more of a nerd. When the bar closed, Tricia told Sheila she was leaving and asked if she wanted to come back with her to the apartment they shared, where they lived with 4 other girls. Sheila looked at me and asked if I could take her home later. I nodded and said goodbye to Tricia. After closing, there were about 12 guys and about 10 women left in the bar, among whom was Sheila. Butch gave us about an hour to linger while he cleaned up and restocked the bar. We could still buy beer and play music on the jukebox. Almost all the songs were slow and Sheila and I danced. Bob and Ray, two other bikers, asked if they could dance with Sheila. I replied, "Sorry guys, but she's with me today." This was the first time I said that about some woman who stayed in a bar after closing. The guys looked unhappy, but I knew they wouldn't cause any problems. These were the same guys who slept with her 2 weeks ago. Sheila smiled and kissed me. We went back to a corner of the bar, not far from the toilets, where we had sex. It was really good to be with her. I've never been in love, but maybe this was the feeling. I didn't know what to do with her. I definitely wanted to see her again, but I still didn't want a relationship where I had to share my woman with others. Sheila went to the toilet, cleaned herself up, and I took her home on the motorcycle. She gave me her number and asked me to call her. I called Sheila midweek and asked if she wanted to go to a fish dinner with me on Friday. She was happy to hear me, and we agreed on a time when I would pick her up. I wasn't completely sure about this relationship because I had never had a serious one. Most of my relationships were casual sex with different women on Saturdays. Half of them were married, so this was all new territory for me. I wanted something more in life and hoped that maybe Sheila was the one for me. I took her to a fish dinner, and my brother Bill and his family were there. They were surprised to see me with a girl, and even one as beautiful and smart as Sheila. I immediately felt better. We spent about an hour there, after which Sheila wanted to see my trailer. We walked towards me, and both knew what would happen next. I spent about 5 minutes showing her the trailer, and then we started kissing. We made love. After that, she went to take a shower, and then I took a shower after her. Then we sat down and talked a little. "I really like you, Randy. Are you going to the club tomorrow? If so, I will come to be with you." "Sheila, I'm not good at relationships," I said and saw her face turn sad. "But with you, I want to try. I've never felt anything like this for another woman." A smile appeared on her face. "I have a condition that I will need to discuss with you. If you want to be my woman, I'm not going to share you with anyone. This means that on Saturdays we will not go to the club. I can take you anywhere, but not there. It suits me as long as I can be with you. I have my college graduation next week. Do you want to come to it? Afterwards, there will be a party at my parents' place. My family and friends will be there. You can get to know them." It was a little unexpected for me, but I understood that it was important for her. Let's put it this way, I'm not sure about the prom itself because I don't really like crowded places, but I'll definitely come to the party. Will it fit? This is cool. You can meet my sister and my parents. Can I tell them that you are my boyfriend? Certainly. But once again, I want to remind you that with the exception of Friday fish dinners, we will no longer go to the club. Are you okay with this? Yes, sure. The main thing is that you are near and that you love me, and where we go is not important. It was the first time either of us used the word love. She was going to spend the night at her parents', so we got on my motorcycle and I took her to her house, which turned out to be very beautiful. Someone looked out the window when Sheila kissed me and entered the house. The next week, we called a couple of times. She couldn't go to the fish dinner on Friday because of her graduation, which was on Sunday. Carlos asked about her, and I told him that she was my girlfriend now. He just grinned and said, "Congratulations, she's a great woman." I didn't really like his tone, but it wasn't something worth fighting over. On Sunday, I arrived at her house. After knocking, I saw that a pretty girl opened the door. She introduced herself as Olivia, Sheila's sister. She smiled at me, and I felt something inside, some warm feeling that I had never felt before. I introduced myself as Randy, and she said Sheila asked her to look after me. Olivia took my hand and led me through the house onto the deck and into the backyard. Her hand was so soft, and I felt a slight shock, perhaps from static electricity from the carpet. There were a lot of people on the terrace and backyard. Olivia called Sheila, and she came over to us. Olivia let go of my hand, and I hugged Sheila. She took me to her parents and introduced me. They were friendly, but I immediately felt that they did not fully approve of me. Sheila introduced me to family and friends from college. I noticed Tricia and said hello to her. Among the guests were many of her classmates, and I couldn't help wondering if she was with one of them. It is difficult to avoid such thoughts. I felt like a stranger at this party. Sheila was busy communicating with the guests, as the holiday was organized in her honor. I just sat on the sidelines, drank a beer, and watched what was happening. When they announced that the buffet was open, I went over to grab a plate of food. I sat down at a table away from the main group of people. As I was eating, Olivia came up to me and asked if she could join us. I smiled at her and replied, "Of course, I will be glad to see your company." I don't even know how the word glad escaped me. She sat down and asked how I was enjoying the party. I replied that I felt out of place, but that the food here was amazing. She laughed, and I noticed how beautiful she was. She was natural, without any pretentiousness or makeup, and this was her special charm. We were talking, and I asked her about Sheila and herself. Sheila once mentioned that she and her sister were complete opposites, but I noticed that they were both very beautiful. Olivia smiled and talked a little about how she and Sheila grew up. Sheila and I have almost always been complete opposites of each other. She loves to be the center of attention, to be in charge. I prefer to stay in the shadows and not draw attention to myself, Olivia said, smiling. What do you mean? Can you give examples? I really wanted to continue the conversation with Olivia, and I was interested in getting her point of view on Sheila. Well, when we were kids, Sheila wanted to enter the Little Princess competition. My parents asked me if I wanted to participate too, but I replied that I didn't want to be the center of attention. Sheila ended up winning the competition. In high school, she simply had to become a cheerleader. She liked it when all the guys looked at her in her performance uniform. I, on the contrary, don't like to be the object of attention, and I think I'm even a little shy, Olivia said with slight embarrassment. Believe me, Olivia, you have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. You are a very beautiful girl, and I'm not just saying this because you're Sheila's sister. You see, I don't even know how to take compliments, she replied, blushing. Sheila wanted to be prom queen and worked hard to achieve it. I didn't see much point in it, but I was happy for her when she won. Did you always get along with her? I asked. No, not always, Olivia laughed. I often get tired of her whining and complaining. Sometimes she would take guys away from me and then just leave them. What do you mean? I asked, surprised by her words. When I went on dates, guys knew Sheila's reputation and thought I would behave the same way. Sheila could then go on a date with them and give them what they wanted. After some time, she left them, and then they tried to invite me again. I just told them I wasn't interested in them, and they left me alone. I hope Sheila isn't taking advantage of you, Randy. You seem like a really nice guy to me. So you and Sheila had moments of jealousy? I asked. Maybe in childhood, but not anymore. In fact, I even feel sorry for her. I hope she grows up when she starts working at the hospital, and I'm graduating from college next year with a nursing degree, Olivia replied. I thought Sheila was 2 years older than you, I asked. That's true, but I studied without summer holidays in order to graduate from college faster. And Sheila preferred to spend the summer on the beaches with friends. I'm not a party animal, and I definitely don't want to be like her. Sorry if I'm being too harsh. I just want to find someone who cares as much as you do, Olivia said. I wanted to talk to her more, but her parents came up to us. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. White. The party was great, and the food was amazing. I haven't eaten this well in a long time, I said. Thank you, Randy. Tell us a little about yourself. Sheila hasn't said much about you. You've just met a couple of times, Mr. White said. In fact, there's not much you can say about me. My parents divorced when I was 12. I haven't seen or heard from my father in 12 years. I don't know if he's even alive. My mother passed away about 7 months ago. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers, but they are all much older than me. My younger sister is 12 years older than me. We rarely see each other, and my older sister actually lives in Ohio. How did you meet Sheila? Asked Mr. White. I knew that talking about meeting at a bar wouldn't be the best option, but I didn't know what Sheila might have already told them. Luckily, Olivia intervened and mentioned fish dinners, so I decided to keep it up. There's one bar that has the best fish and chips in the entire state. On Fridays, there is a special dinner there. One day, a group of college kids came by, and that's how I met Sheila. We talked, I asked for her number, and since then we have met several times. "And what do you do? Are you working?" asked Mr. White. "Yes, of course, I have always worked. As a child, I sold newspapers to help my mother. After graduating from school, he got a job in construction. My specialty is concrete work, but I also do roofing and other renovation work." At that moment, Sheila came up to us. "What's going on here? Dad, aren't you questioning him too much? Randy is a good person, and you should just get to know him. He's my boyfriend after all," she said, hugging me. "We're just talking. It was nice meeting you, Randy. I hope we can talk some more," Mr. White said, and he and his wife went to chat with the other guests. I thanked Olivia for the company and told Sheila that it was time for me to leave. She kissed me and asked me to call in a couple of days. Her first day at the hospital was scheduled for Monday. I actually called her a couple times a week. On Fridays, we went to Butch's fish dinners. Some of the regulars came up and hugged her and said hello to me. I didn't like it very much, but I understood that Sheila was just being friendly and wasn't doing anything wrong. On Saturdays, we ate dinner at a nice restaurant, went to the movies, baseball games, or other events in town. The main thing is that we were together, and everything invariably ended in bed. Sheila was a great lover. She was ready to do anything for me. Since we both worked, we usually only had sex on Fridays and Saturdays. I sometimes wondered about her past relationships, but we agreed that the past remains in the past. I myself had many casual relationships, which I also would not like to talk about. Sheila often stayed at my trailer on Saturdays. Her parents weren't thrilled about it, but they didn't say anything either. I guess they didn't want to ruin their relationship with their daughter, and maybe Olivia was convincing them that I was better than many of Sheila's past boyfriends. On Sundays, we had lunch with Sheila's family at their home. Even though I was dating their daughter, I had the feeling that Mr. White was beginning to acknowledge me a little, as if he had even done some kind of background check. The hardest part of being with the Whites was dealing with Olivia. I knew I felt something for her, but I didn't want to ruin anyone's life. I was dating Sheila, and while everything was going well, I tried not to focus on my feelings for Olivia. Sheila said that she liked her new job and the feeling of freedom it gave. I didn't fully understand this because she always did what she wanted before. About 3 months into her job, she asked me if I would mind if she spent the evening with other nurses. To be honest, it was unpleasant for me, but I couldn't tell her about it. I said it was okay and we could meet on Saturday. She kissed me and said she knew I would understand. She didn't seem to know me that well. I don't want to admit it, but I asked her where they were going to go. I left the trailer and went to the restaurant where she said they were going to go. They came, and I felt like a fool hiding in the parking lot. Later, they went to the lounge of one of the large motels. It was quite easy to spy on them. The point is that she didn't do anything wrong. They drank a few cocktails, listened to music, and even danced a little. She danced with 2 different guys, but that was the end of it. I felt like an idiot for my behavior and returned to my truck to head home. The next day, when we went on a date and to the movies, I asked her about how her evening with her friends went. She told almost exactly everything I saw. She was honest with me, even telling me that she danced a little. Throughout the month, we went to fish dinner on Fridays and elsewhere on Saturdays, always ending the evening in my trailer. On Sundays, we still went to her parents. Meeting Olivia still bothered me, but I hid it well. I couldn't understand why Olivia had such an effect on me. Olivia was red-haired and looked like her mother, and Sheila was a natural blonde. Both were beautiful. One was quiet, the other was sociable. Olivia was always nice to me and never behaved inappropriately. Sometimes I noticed Sheila staring at her sister but not saying anything. We discussed going out for a fish dinner on Friday, and I asked Mr. and Mrs. White if they would like to come with us next time. They refused, but Olivia suddenly said she wanted to join. A lot of people in college were talking about this dinner and how they had the best fish, she said. She wasn't too happy that it was a biker bar, but since she would be with us, she decided to give it a try. Sheila wasn't too keen on the idea of her sister coming with us, but she didn't say anything, although her mood changed a little. I received a call at work that my older sister, who lives in Ohio, was scheduled to undergo surgery on Friday. I decided to go see her on Saturday and return on Sunday. I didn't know how difficult the operation would be, but I assumed that on the day of the operation she would have no time for communication. I picked up Sheila and Olivia for a fish dinner in my F-150. Sheila wore a short skirt and blouse, and Olivia wore trousers and a nice blouse. It seemed to me that Sheila was trying to outdo Olivia, but I chose not to get involved in their rivalry. I told them they both looked great. Sheila sat next to me and Olivia sat in the front seat. I warned Olivia that the bar was a little wild, but they have a family fish night on Fridays, so it shouldn't be a problem. As long as I'm with you, I don't worry, Olivia said in a quiet voice. Besides, Sheila has been here more than once and looks quite unharmed. Sheila was about to answer when we just pulled up to Butch's bar. It was full of people, and then I remembered that Butch was having a special fish night to celebrate his 30th year of owning the bar. He lowered the price of beer, invited a small group, and even set up a large tent outside for extra space. I must admit, a lot of people gathered. As we walked in, Butch greeted us. He knew Sheila, and she hugged him. I introduced Olivia to him, and he shook her hand. As we sat down, Bill, Ray, Carlos, and other acquaintances began to come to our table to say hello. Of course, Sheila hugged them all. I introduced Olivia as Sheila's sister, and she said hello to everyone. It was already noticeable that the guys began to glance at her. They joked that I was lucky to be sitting with two beautiful women. Sheila laughed and Olivia just smiled. After we ate, my brother Bill and his family came to our table to say hello. They met Sheila more than once, and I introduced Olivia to them. She greeted Bill's entire family. My other brother, Stan, was also at dinner, and I introduced him to Olivia. They informed me that our sister Sue had gallbladder surgery that same day. I said that I would go to her in the morning to visit her. They agreed that it would be better to wait a day for her to come to her senses a little. After they left, Bob returned to our table and asked Olivia to dance. "No, thank you," she replied, without explaining anything further. When he continued to persuade her, I asked him to leave her alone, saying that she was my guest, and I did not want her to be bothered. I was shocked when Sheila said, "She doesn't like parties, I'll dance with you, Bob." I was a little angry, but I just looked at her with disapproval. When she returned to the table, she said that she had done nothing wrong because it was just a dance. Later, she danced with Ray while I talked to Olivia. When Carlos asked Sheila to dance, I was already angry. "Olivia, would you like to dance with me?" I suggested. It was a slow dance, and she agreed. I held her in my arms, and it felt so good. She laid her head on my shoulder, and I got those damn butterflies in my stomach again. I was almost sad when the dance ended. Returning to the table, Sheila said nothing, but looked at Olivia with a displeased expression. Sharon, Carlos' wife, came over and said hello. Sheila asked me to dance, but I looked at Olivia. I didn't want to leave her alone at the table. Sharon said she talked to Olivia while I danced with Sheila. Sheila pressed herself tightly against me and moved my hands to her butt. I held them there for a few seconds and then returned them to her waist. On the dance floor, she kissed me, showing everyone that we were together. When we returned to the table, Sharon stood up to leave. She hugged me and whispered in my ear, "This girl loves you." And she left. I still didn't understand which girl she was talking about. We left the bar, and of course Sheila hugged all the guys again. Olivia just looked at me. We got in the truck, and I took the girls home. I told Sheila that I would be leaving early in the morning and would probably be back Sunday evening. We kissed, and I drove home to get some sleep before leaving early. The next day, I was glad that I went to visit my sister. She was so happy to see me. I bought her flowers and a card from the hospital store. We talked for several hours about her family, and I told her that I had met a girl, although our relationship was not too serious yet. She wished me all the best. I suddenly realized that I love my sister. I guess I started to approach life differently, or maybe I just matured. Her two daughters also came to visit her along with her husband. After our meeting, I went to dinner with them. They invited me to sleep on their couch, and I agreed. On Sunday morning, I stopped by the hospital one more time to see my sister before heading home. At home, I took a shower and went to bed since I had to go to work the next day. Monday evening, I called Sheila. She said she missed me. I told her that my sister was feeling better and would most likely be discharged from the hospital that same day. I asked her what she did over the weekend. She replied that she went out with friends on Saturday and spent Sunday at home. She didn't specify who she went with or where, and I decided not to touch on this topic and just trust her. On Thursday, we called again, and I asked her if we were going to go out for a fish dinner on Friday. She said we should take a break for a few weeks because she was tired of these Friday hikes. This suited me quite well, and we started going to other restaurants. On Saturdays, we started going to different sports games. Although I wasn't a crowd pleaser, Sheila loved it. She even convinced her parents to come with us to one of the games. Looks like they're starting to get used to me. We hadn't gone to a fish dinner in almost 2 months, and Sheila was acting a little differently, although she still hugged some people she knew. They asked where we had gone, and I replied that we were just trying other restaurants. It was a few more weeks before we went out for a fish dinner again. One day, I came to pick up Sheila on a Friday. She looked tense for some reason. She was talking to Olivia when I walked in. Olivia looked at me and left the room without saying anything. It felt like something was wrong. I asked Sheila where she wanted to go, and she said she wanted to go to my trailer because she needed to talk to me. I knew that something was bothering her, but I didn't understand what exactly. Deep down, I suspected it might have something to do with Olivia, but I didn't know why. I never allowed myself to do anything inappropriate with Olivia and never shared with anyone the feelings I felt in her presence. We didn't talk on the way to the trailer. When we walked in, Sheila asked me to make her tea. I made tea for her and grabbed a beer for myself. "Okay, Sheila, what's wrong?" I asked. "I took a pregnancy test a few days ago, and it was positive. Today, I went to the doctor, and she confirmed that I am pregnant." There were tears in her eyes. "But you said you were taking pills. How did that happen?" I asked. "A couple of months ago, they ran out, and I missed my appointment by about a week. I thought it was no big deal, but apparently it was enough." There were tears in her eyes, and I honestly didn't know what to do. I asked her if this was what she and Olivia were discussing when I arrived. She nodded. "I'm going to tell my parents everything on Sunday. I know they'll be disappointed, but I need to talk to them about what to do next. I was hoping you'd be there. We did this together." She was right. Although I wasn't sure how I felt about her, I knew that I really liked her. I wasn't ready to ask her to marry me, but I knew I had to be responsible and support her. "Sheila, of course I'll be with you, and we'll tell your parents together. We'll get married and start our own family. There's plenty of room in the trailer, and we can save up for a house later." She burst into tears and hugged me. "Well, if you agree to marry me," I added. "Of course I do. I love you, Randy." I replied that I loved her too and would do everything possible to be a good husband and father. I decided that I would try for the sake of my new family and do everything to make it work for us. We made love in the trailer. I asked her if it was possible to have sex during pregnancy. She said that the doctor gave permission, and if it didn't hurt her, we could continue. On Sunday, I came to their house. We were all sitting at the table when I told Mr. and Mrs. White that I wanted to ask them something. "What's wrong, Randy?" asked her father. "I asked Sheila to marry me, and she agreed. We want to ask for your blessing." I looked at Olivia, but she wasn't looking my way. Mr. White said, "Are you both sure about this? You haven't known each other very long, and I understand that your financial affairs are not in order yet either." Mrs. White also spoke up. Don't you think you are rushing into this marriage? Maybe you should get to know each other better and spend more time together before making such a decision. Mom, I'm pregnant. I haven't had these days for 2 months, and I went to the doctor this week. She confirmed that I'm about 3 months along, Sheila said. Her father shook his head. And what are you going to do now? Sir, we thought that we would get married as soon as possible and live in my trailer for the first time. It is clean and there is enough space. We are planning to save money for the future so that we can buy a house later, I replied. Sheila added, Mom, Dad, I know this has come as a shock to you, but Randy and I love each other and we'll make it work. We were planning on getting married next month, while my baby bump wasn't very noticeable. We can make her modest and spend it with loved ones. There wasn't much to say after that. I felt awkward because Olivia never looked at me. After dinner, Sheila and her mother went into the living room to discuss the details of the upcoming wedding. I stayed to talk to Mr. White and promised him that I would be a good husband to his daughter and would always put her interests first. We didn't go out much for the next month. I used to go to the Whites, and they and Sheila would plan the wedding. Olivia was my maid of honor, and I asked my brother Stan to be my best man. Sheila invited several friends from college and a large number of relatives. I invited my brothers and sisters, and they all came. It was nice. I also invited Butch from the bar, but no one else. I didn't want bikers at the wedding. The wedding was much more modest than Sheila had dreamed, but it turned out very beautiful. I felt awkward under everyone's attention, but Sheila was in seventh heaven. The food was great and Sheila looked lovely. Her wedding dress hid any signs of pregnancy. My sisters were happy for me and said that I would be a great father because I knew how not to behave. They said this as a joke, but there was truth in their words. Olivia has barely spoken to me since we announced our wedding. At the celebration itself, I asked her to dance, and she wished me all the best, hoping that I had made the right choice. Overall, the wedding was wonderful. Sheila hardly drank because she was expecting a baby, and she didn't like it too much. For our honeymoon, we went to a nearby town for the weekend. But on Monday, we both had to go to work, so we returned quickly. Over the following weeks, Sheila gradually moved her belongings into the trailer. I couldn't believe how many clothes and other things she had. My trailer had 3 rooms. We set aside one of the rooms for her things, we started preparing the other for the child, and the third was our bedroom. I quickly learned that Sheila wasn't much of a cook. Most often we ate out or went to her parents' house for dinner. We made love often, but every month it happened less and less as her belly grew. I just thought it was natural. We talked a lot about our future and what we would do after the birth of the child. We have not touched on these topics before. Sheila's mom said I didn't have to call her Mrs. White and could just call her Carol. We became closer, especially as Sheila's pregnancy progressed. She saw that I was really trying to be a good husband for her daughter and helping as much as I could. Since Sheila and I both worked, I told Carol that I needed to learn how to cook something simple. She laughed and called Olivia into the room, saying that Olivia was a great cook and could show Sheila and me some simple dishes. Olivia didn't seem too happy, but she came over several times a week to teach me how to cook simple dishes like spaghetti and a few other recipes. I usually came home first, and we started cooking dinner together. Sheila arrived about an hour late. Honestly, I loved my time cooking with Olivia. She always smiled and laughed at my failures. After the 3 of us ate dinner, Olivia came home saying she had homework to finish. Sheila and I stayed together, cuddling and watching TV. The larger her belly grew, the less she wanted to go out. I told her that she looked great, even when she was pregnant. We didn't go to the bar for several months because Sheila didn't want to go there with her big belly. I told her she wasn't the first woman to have a baby, but she didn't appreciate the joke. We found out we were having a girl and started coming up with names. Some of them were not very successful, but in the end we decided to name her Victoria. I knew I would call her Vicky. Sheila began to act rather irritable. I decided it was related to pregnancy. For every little thing I became guilty. I didn't argue, understanding that it was hard for her. Olivia talked to her and shared with me what they talked about. Sheila didn't like that her figure was changing. She has always been very vain. She was offended that she could not drink, although she rarely did it, but the ban itself made her angry. I myself quit smoking as soon as we got married. I decided that I didn't need it because I would soon become a father. Olivia also told me that Sheila doesn't like the way men look at her now. I didn't understand what bothered her so much because, in my opinion, she looked beautiful and even especially attractive. The further her pregnancy progressed, the more she wanted it to end. She said that after the birth of the child, she would immediately sign up for a fitness club and get back into shape. I can't even count how many times she blamed me for her pregnancy. There was no use arguing with her. One day, when Olivia came in after studying, she and I talked about how Sheila was behaving. I understood that it was difficult for her, and I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. I tried to take on more household responsibilities and help with dinner as much as I could. Olivia smiled at me and said, "Randy, you are a good person, and Sheila is lucky to have you. I can offer one piece of advice. Sheila is on her feet all day, and with the extra weight, her legs are probably hurting. Try giving her a foot massage at least a few minutes in the evening. It will help her relax, and maybe she will stop being so angry with you." There was something about Olivia that I really liked. If only, but no, I decided that I wouldn't think about it. I am now married and will soon become a father. I decided to take Olivia's advice and give Sheila a foot massage when she got home. She loved it. I started giving her massages every evening after work. It only took about 15 minutes, but she did become much calmer and less irritable. Before going to bed, she lay on her stomach on pillows, and I massaged her back. Another topic of discussion was who would look after our daughter after she was born. Sheila said she wasn't going to quit her job, and of course I couldn't afford that either. Her mother, Carol, came to the rescue. Sheila had planned to take 6 weeks off, after which Carol offered to look after Vicky while we were at work. One of us will pick her up every evening. This was a great decision because Carol had no intention of taking money to care for her granddaughter. One day, I received a call from Sheila. She was at work in the hospital and her water broke. I said that I would come as soon as possible, and she asked me to grab her suitcase, which was already packed for the trip to the maternity hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, they let me into her maternity ward. She was very irritated and even swore at me because it was my fault. I didn't know what to answer her, so I went out into the waiting room, where her parents and Olivia were already there. I would like to say that the birth was quick and easy, but it was not so. We spent 6 hours in the hospital. Every time I entered the room, Sheila swore at me again. She spoke much more softly to her parents. Olivia stayed away the entire time, not saying much. When it was time to give birth, I returned to the room, putting on a robe. I wanted to be present at the birth of my daughter. Carol stayed in the room too, holding Sheila's hand, while I watched my baby come into the world. I cut the umbilical cord, and the baby was taken away to be measured and trimmed. When she was returned, I was the first to hold her in my arms. She was so tiny and beautiful that I immediately fell in love with her. I felt tears running down my cheeks. I held her in my arms while the nurses cleaned Sheila up. Then I handed the baby to Carol, who also had tears in her eyes with joy at becoming a grandmother. I went into the waiting room and told Mr. White and Olivia that they now had a granddaughter and niece. They both went into the room to see the baby. Sheila was already sitting and holding her in her arms. Our new family life has begun. The next day, I took Sheila and the baby home. Carol came to help her daughter, and to be honest, I was very happy about that because I had no idea what to do. Carol cooked dinner, and Mr. White came home after work. Olivia also came by after studying. I held the baby in my arms as often as I could. Every evening after work, I rushed home to be with my family. Carol often came to us and explained how to care for a child and what to pay attention to. I loved holding my daughter in my arms and feeding her. I didn't really like changing her clothes, but I did it for her sake. I even became the one who got up in the middle of the night to change her diaper, and then rocked her until she fell asleep again. A month after giving birth, Sheila started going to fitness classes. She said she wants to get back to her old shape. I didn't mind, especially when I found out that it was a women-only class. I guess I never fully trusted Sheila, although I never told her so. She attended training at least 3 times a week, and admittedly, she managed to get back into shape. When it was time to return to work, she was assigned to the evening shift. She wasn't particularly happy about it. Now she stayed with Vicky in the morning and took her to her mother around noon. After training, she went to work, and I picked Vicky up from the Whites. Every evening was like a little adventure for me because I loved my daughter so much. Some days I stayed at the Whites for dinner, and other days I just wanted to be home and relax with Vicky. Over time, Olivia began to come to us after school to see Vicky. She seemed to love her as much as Sheila and I did. Olivia often stayed for several hours and even cooked dinner. I watched some TV, holding the baby in my arms, while Olivia did her homework. I knew it was a little risky to let Olivia be a part of my life, because being around her would make me get those same butterflies in my stomach again. To be honest, there was never anything indecent between Olivia and me. I never even kissed her. It just felt so good to have her around. I saw Sheila infrequently during the week. When she returned from work, I was already asleep. On weekends, we would ask Carol or Olivia to babysit Vicky so Sheila and I could spend time together, like going out to dinner or going somewhere. Sometimes we went to the movies, sometimes to sports games, and sometimes we just danced. A few months after giving birth, Sheila returned to her previous shape. Once a month, we went to a fish dinner, and the same people were there. The only people I was glad to see were Butch, Sharon, and my brothers. As for Carlos, Bob, and Ray, I didn't care. Butch's place seemed to remind me of the past, and I didn't want those guys hugging my wife again. Everyone kept asking about the baby and saying that Sheila looked great for a mother. She liked it, but I didn't. Sharon once told me that she wanted to tell me something, but I didn't find time to talk to her for a long time. Sheila again began insisting on going out with the friends she worked with. Since she worked the second shift, these outings were scheduled for Saturdays. She said it would only be once a month. I agreed, but said I wanted to know where she would be in case I needed to contact her. I couldn't control her because I stayed with Vicky. I tried my best to trust her. I usually waited for her to return when she spent the evenings with her friends. She usually came home pretty horny, and we almost always had good sex. Olivia was getting ready for graduation, and we were all going to her ceremony. Sheila reminded me that I didn't go to her graduation. We'd only been dating for a couple of weeks, and I barely knew your family at the time. I think they'd be upset if we didn't go to your sister's graduation. That doesn't mean I'm looking forward to the event, but it's the right thing to do. Olivia's party was similar to Sheila's, only this time there were fewer friends from college, just a few girlfriends, and of course, a lot of relatives. It seemed to me that Sheila didn't like that the spotlight wasn't on her. She immediately took Vicky in her arms to show her to all her relatives. Olivia looked at me and smiled, realizing that Sheila just wanted to be the center of attention. I congratulated Olivia and hugged her. She unexpectedly returned the hug. There was some kind of unknown force between us, and it seemed to me that we both understood it. Vicky was about 6 months old and was already starting to try different new things. I was amazed at how quickly my baby was developing. Olivia started working at the hospital on the day shift as she completed her training. Sheila didn't like this too much since she was working the second shift. Sometimes I would stay at work for a couple of hours overtime to complete urgent tasks. On days like this, if I couldn't pick Vicky up from the Whites, Olivia would offer to take her home after work. I sometimes ordered dinner for us, or Olivia cooked something herself. Sheila didn't like Olivia coming over so often. I swore to her that there was nothing between me and Olivia, that she was like a sister to me. At least that's what I told Sheila. In fact, I think I loved Olivia, but I couldn't afford to destroy my family for the sake of these feelings. One Friday, Sheila took the day off to take Vicky for a routine checkup. I was working that day and was surprised that she didn't go to work after her doctor's appointment. She said she decided to take the whole day off. Moreover, she suggested going for a fish dinner in the evening. She, as usual, hugged everyone she knew, which was not very pleasant for me. This time she even talked to the guys longer than usual. While we were eating, she suddenly remembered that she had not told me that she was going to the play on Saturday night. When I asked who she was going with, she replied that she was with Olivia. One of the doctors on the day shift got 2 tickets, but couldn't go and offered them to Olivia. She asked if I wanted to join her. I thought you wouldn't mind. If I trusted anyone, it was Olivia. Sheila said they planned to have dinner around 8, and the show starts at 10, so they won't be home until after midnight. To be continued. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the next part of this story. She will be there very soon. The link to the sequel will be in the description of this video below. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.